You have a firm to run, a team to manage, and a mountain of data to protect. You likely have an IT provider who keeps your computers running. But do you have a qualified individual ensuring you stay on the right side of the law? Welcome to The Qualified Individual, the 10-minute briefing for smart accounting firms. I'm your host, and I'm here to help you bridge the gap between standard IT and total FTC compliance. Every episode, we strip away the jargon to talk about the FTC safeguards rule, the hidden risks your MSP is likely missing, and the strategies that protect your client data and your personal liability. So, let's grab your coffee and let's get to work. Here's the scenario that plays out more often than you think. A CPA firm, solid practice, maybe 30 people, been in business for 20 years, has a breach. Nothing massive, but enough that they have to file a cyber insurance claim. They are confident that it will be covered. Well, after all, they have insurance, right? Well, the claims gets denied. Now, what happened? They had what they thought was a good coverage. But when they actually filed, they learned something their broker had never really spelled out for them. Sublimits. The policy had a $1 million headline limit, which sounds great until you realize that forensics may be capped at $100,000, notification cost at $50,000, business interruption at something completely different. So before they even go into the main liability question, they already hit the ceiling on the parts that actually gets triggered first in a real breach. But here's the part that really stuck me, the denial itself. We know from industry data that between 40 and 44% of cyber insurance claims gets denied. Let me say that again. Nearly half of all claims that get filed gets rejected. The number one reason? Lack of adequate security controls. Insurers are looking at whether you have the basics in place before the breach happened. Do you have access controls? We're doing semi-annual reviews of who had access to what? Did you have a multi-factor authentication? Were you monitoring suspicious activity? This is where the FTC safeguards rule and insurance underwriting align in a really important way. When you are a financial institution, and CPA firms are classified as such, the FTC has established expectations about what your security program should include. Cyber insurers have aligned their claims requirements directly to those expectations. They are not asking anything extra. They're asking, do you have what the FTC says you need? Let me unpack that denial letter a little bit more. When an insurer denies a claim for lack of controls, they're typically looking for a specific checklist of what constitutes adequate controls. Did you have access controls documented? That means something very specific, a record of who has access to what systems and data, reviewed and updated regularly. Not just knowing it in your head or having it scattered across emails. It has to be documented and verifiable. That's the difference between we manage access and we have access controls policy with defined roles, documented approval processes, and we've done quarterly access reviews that we can show it to you. The same applies to multi-factor authentication. It's not enough to know it's a good idea or to have it available as an option. Insurers want evidence that you require it, ideally for remote access, absolutely for anyone accessing client files, banking portals, or your core financial systems. They want to see that you've made it non-negotiable in your security standards, and documentation shows when you implement it, which users and systems it applied to, and how you are monitoring compliance with it. Insurers also look at whether you have an encryption verification process. Again, documentation that you have identified where sensitive data lives and verify that it's encrypted both in transit and at rest. They want to see evidence of backup testing, not just that you have backups, but you've actually tested whether you can restore from them when you need it to. And they want an incident response plan that's been documented and reviewed, with clear procedures for detection, containment, notification, and escalation. Let me also talk a little bit more about what's not in your policy. Most cyber insurance for small to mid-sized CPA firms doesn't cover reputation management in the way it should. You've got forensics, investigation costs, notification cost, some business interruption. But what about the clients who leave after you've been notified them of a breach? Some policies will cover loss of income, others won't. The premium you are paying might look reasonably until you actually need to file a claim and discover that your coverage for what actually harms your business is much smaller than you thought. Here's what it means in practice for your firm. Insurance is the financial safety net, but is not a substitute for controls. Insurance assumes that you have reasonable controls in place. The insurer is basically betting that your controls reduce the likelihood of a large claims in the first place. If you don't have those controls, they're betting that your claim will be expensive anomaly. And, well, they will reserve the right to decline it. So, what should you be documenting right now? Start with access controls. Create a documented system, a spreadsheet or a formal access management tool that lists every employee and contractor, what systems they have access to, what data they can retrieve, and when that access was last reviewed. This isn't just a nice to have. It's something you'll show your insurer if you ever have to file a claim. This is your access control documentation and is central to your security program. The documentation doesn't have to be overly extensive or overcomplicated. For a 15-person firm, for example, a spreadsheet will be more than enough. For a bigger organization with different departments and more systems, complexities can be added up. When you're shopping for cyber insurance or renewing, make sure your broker understands that you are willing to invest in controls to reduce your claim risk. When you approach your renewal, bring your security documentation, show your access reviews, show your backup testing results, make sure the sublimits align with what you actually need if something went wrong. Make sure your policy covers that. There's another angle to insurance that I want to also mention. You need to read that language very carefully. Does your policy require MFA? Does it require encryption? Does it require access controls? The bottom line, your cyber insurance is only as good as the controls that support it. If what we talk about resonated with you, I encourage you to take the next step. Head over to safeguardgrc.com. That's safeguardgrc.com. It's the platform I built specifically for CPA firms to manage everything we've been discussing. Your risk assessment, your policies, your access reviews, your vendor oversight, training documentation, all in one place. Mapped directly to the FTC Safeguards Rule and the IRS publication 4557. You don't need to figure this out alone, and you don't have to build it from scratch. Safeguard GRC walks you through it module by module, so you can get your governance program up and running without becoming a security expert. Whether you are just getting started or you're preparing for your next insurance renewal, it gives you the structure and the documentation to do it right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.